Welcome to Silvacast, the podcast about all things silviculture. My name is Greg Edge,
And I'm Brad Hutnick.
and we are both silviculturists with Wisconsin DNR Division of Forestry and your hosts for today's show. Ah! Oh!
Well, what seems to be the problem over there, Gregor?
This frickin' paint gun, it just exploded all over my face again. Look at my new glasses. I'm never going to get all this paint off.
I like the new look.
Hilarious, Bradley. It keeps clogging up. So I unscrewed the nozzle and it just exploded everywhere. And this is my last paint gun. The other one I brought today, it's in even worse shape.
If I'm looking at your gun, Greg, do you expect something different to happen? I mean, look, that thing is old. I mean, you could sell that thing on Antiques Roadshow, or you should take it to Antiques Roadshow. Maybe this is one of those, your paint gun is so old, it's
Hey.
patent office number 1. Your paint gun is so old. Well, okay, I won't go down that rabbit hole, but you get the idea. I don't want to ask the question, but when's the last time you actually did any maintenance on that thing?
I just don't mark that much timber anymore. So it's been sitting in the trunk of my car for, well, okay, it's been a while.
I'm not sure I can help you, Greg, but here, try to use this wire and ream out the nozzle just a little. It's probably just a little clogged.
Okay, fine.
But you are not alone, my friend. I think every forester from time to time has been frustrated with their paint gun. That's why today on Silvacast, we're going to talk about the most basic tool of our trade. So you'll be excited to learn that we've invited a few guests to give us paint gun tips. Joining us today are Ethan Tapper with Bear Island Forestry, John Freeman with the Panama Pump Company, and Ryan Holm from the Nelson Paint Company. I'm sure they'll be happy to tell you, me, and everyone what we're doing wrong.
Thanks. I can hardly wait.
This season of Silvacast is brought to you by the Nelson Paint Company, McCoy Construction and Forestry, and the Family Forest Carbon Program. You make the Silvacast world go round, so thank you.
Hey, Ethan Tapper, welcome to Silvacast.
Thanks for having me.
It's really nice to meet you. For our listeners, Ethan, can you tell us just a little bit about where you work and what you do?
Sure. I am currently a consulting forester. I work in northwestern Vermont. And for many years, I was actually a service forester. We call them in Vermont county foresters. I was the Chittenden County Forester for the Vermont Department of Forest Parks and Recreation for about 8 years. And then I just started out on my own consulting forestry business, which is called Bear Island Forestry, on June 1.
Oh, cool.
Greg, this is another part of our Vermont connection with Silvacast. It seems like, was it every 3 episodes we talk to someone from Vermont?
I know.
We are a small and mighty state.
But influential. And you worked with Dave Paganelli.
Of course, yeah.
Oh yeah, and Lou Bushy and everybody there. They're just you guys are fantastic in Vermont. I don't know if I'm just jealous or whatever it is, but you guys are fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you keep winning
But they lost this year. That was just out. So SAF, the student
Quiz Bowl.
Quiz Bowl. That's what I'm looking for.
So yes, so last year you guys were on top of the heap, but this year it's a SUNY. So Vermont was on top, but hey,
I still think we're the best, though.
yeah, yep. I think Greg and I are really interested. Well, 2 reasons. One is you did a really good video, which I'd love to dig into it a little bit with you here about maintaining your tree coater gun, which was really good. And then, but you could tell us a little bit, like you had a transition, right? You got like much more to your business now too, besides just doing consulting forestry.
Yeah, so I wrote a book called How to Love a Forest. And I'm actually, as we record this, I'm on book tour in Maine promoting that book. And I think that's a book that a lot of foresters and landowners and lay people, that I think it does a lot to explain really what it is that we do. Because there's so many misconceptions about our work, what we do to care for forests. And I feel like it's really a land ethic book. It's about our relationship to forests that I think will go a long way towards supporting our community, folks who take care of forests.
Cool.
And then I do social media, big following on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. And Also do a little bit of consulting with government agencies and NGOs, especially around communication. When I was a county forester, that was really my specialty, was communicating these complex forest management projects to the public in a way that's relatable and engaging and that reaches people. So those are all the components of what now make up my business, as well as the consulting forestry work, of course.
The video on maintaining your paint gun got our attention. So, what inspired you to do a video on your paint gun?
I was at I think an SAF gathering, and we were just talking about how to engage people on social media. And like, we were like, yeah, you can make a video about, all these different things, but some of these little videos that are just about some nuance of like how you do something, how you use a specific tool are sometimes the ones that get a lot of people there. So I was like, well, I really, really know my Tracoder paint gun really well. And so maybe I'll just make a video about how to take this apart and rebuild it, because I was going to do that anyway, and throw it up there and see what happens.
I totally agree with that. I think just like these simple things we don't think about, passing along that knowledge to folks are really, I don't know, I get a lot out of them.
Yeah, and you gotta, I mean, with the whole social media world, which is sort of this world of its own that can be kind of intimidating. Sometimes it's just you just gotta throw a lot of stuff up there and engage people. And a lot of times the stuff that we actually want to talk about, which may be like the way that we care for forests, for instance, that's one component of it. But then you have a lot of other stuff that's just like, little forest facts and stuff like that that kind of get people there.
Hmm.
And then once they're there, then you can spread this really important message.
Hmm.
Yeah. So your tree coater then. It all comes back to the paint gun, I guess.
Yeah. I say that my tree coater paint gun is like, uh, my grandfather's hammer,
Yeah.
that I replaced the handle 10 times and the head 10 times. You never replaced the whole hammer. I think I've replaced every single component except for the cover, the plastic cover.
Wow.
So yeah, it's just I believe it's an elegant tool in
Oh,
that it's made to be rebuilt, on the tailgate of a pickup truck. And you can do it in like 15 minutes. You can replace every part.
yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why I've stuck with it. It just is, you always have those moments when you're just out there and in the middle of nowhere, and your paint gun isn't working right, and you just got to be able to troubleshoot and do what you got to do to get it working again.
Yeah. What's the biggest mistake that we make when maintaining our tree coater guns then, when you talk to people or in your experience?
I mean, I think that it just requires pretty consistent maintenance. There's a lot of things that can potentially go wrong, and all of those things are actually really easy to fix, but you got to know what they are. I think that, something that we were talking about off air and that people deal with a lot is when you haven't been using your paint gun frequently,
Yeah.
that then you can have some issues. And there's a lot of different strategies for dealing with that. So I keep my paint gun in paint.
Hmm.
I keep paint in it. But if you leave it for a really long time, that can become a problem. And what I would recommend actually is storing the paint gun in paint and then storing the nozzle, the unscrewable nozzle, in thinner.
Hmm.
Oh,
And the problem is that there are these rubber seals that if you were to store the whole paint gun in something corrosive like thinner, it would degrade the seals. And then you would have to replace those rubber seals.
hmm.
So I've heard about people who store it in paint, people who store it in thinner, people who store it in like kerosene or diesel, people who store it, one guy who stores it in automatic transmission fluid.
I haven't heard that one.
And everybody thinks their way is the best, but yeah, but normally what I do is if I haven't been using it a while, the nozzle has just this thin little pinprick hole
Right.
that can get really clogged. So that for me is what I put in the thinner. And then I run thinner through the paint gun a few times, or occasionally WD-40, and that'll kind of get it moving again.
Hmm.
Huh.
You've solved a age-old question because I've seen people, as you've stated, store it in all different kinds of things, and they all swear by, their
Yeah.
method,
Yeah.
and some store it dry, wrapped in an oil rag. I've seen that one too, and just lots of different things.
To be honest, probably the best way to store it would be to just completely take it apart and to take those rubber seals out and to just put everything in thinner. But obviously, that's not practical when we don't want to have to completely reassemble the gun
Right.
Right.
every single time. And again, those rubber seals, they're easy to replace, but you don't want them to be in a corrosive material
Right.
because then ultimately,
Yeah,
they're going to get corroded. You're going to have to replace them.
that makes sense. Yep. So, I mean, maybe my problem is what you stated, Ethan, and that's I don't mark enough timber anymore. So my paint gun sits a lot.
Yeah.
And so then when I pull it out, I have problems. So if I pull out my paint gun and it's just not spraying well, it's really inconsistent or it's sputtering, where do you start with your tree coater? Like, do you have a sort of I start here and I work my way through?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the first thing to check is always the nozzle. That's the piece on a tray coater that you just like screw it right on. It's where the paint sprays out of. Sometimes if you pull the trigger and it just won't pull at all,
Hmm.
that's what it is. Is that little pinprick is clogged, and you need something really thin that's in your truck so you can clear that out. But sometimes it's enough to just take it out. It's threaded on both ends, so you can flip it around,
Hmm.
and then sometimes that will clear it.
Hmm.
And you just flip it around so it's facing the other direction, and that will clear it. The next spot to check is there are two little tiny springs with little tiny bearings. One is where the paint comes out of the cylinder and into the nozzle, and one is at the very bottom of that stem that comes down
Hmm.
where the paint gun draws paint up through this screen. And those little ball bearings and little springs can get all clogged with paint. So that would be my next step. And if that doesn't work, then you just got to take the whole thing apart, basically, which is not hard. I mean, all you need is really a screwdriver and some vice grips, and you can do the whole thing like really fast. But then you can get into some other issues. Like, so if it's just not straight up not spraying, check those things, see if you can't get some paint thinner to run through it. Another thing that can be handy is I like to have like basically a full set of parts that's in my truck. So I can replace literally any part on that paint gun. And having a clean nozzle that's been in thinner that you can swap onto there can be a really good solution for that. And then also you can just go right up through and replace anything that's not working. If
Hmm.
the paint gun is leaky, that's another common issue. So it's not spraying well because it's leaky. I often will do the seals. So those little rubber O-rings.
Hmm.
There are, let me think about this. There's one big one on the top of the cylinder. There's one little tiny one sort of that fits in, that's a little bit of a pain to get in there, that fits in this little round hole where the piston goes into the cylinder. I think those are the two. There, I might be missing one, but I think those are the two main ones. And so if it's leaking from either of those places, just throw new O-rings and they don't cost anything. It's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that can happen is if you feel like you don't have a lot of power, or I should say, backing up, the cylinder itself can get corroded over time. So if you replace those O-rings and it's still leaking, just replace the cylinder.
Hmm.
It's easier than you just fussing around and getting paint squirted everywhere it's not supposed to. And your paint gun will also work better because you're losing power in that paint gun when when all that paint isn't being pushed out the nozzle. The other thing that can happen if you feel like you're not getting good power is that in the cylinder on top of the piston, there is, and that's where that last O-ring is around the bottom of the piston itself, by the way. On top of that piston, there's a spring. And that spring over time can also get compressed, which can lower, the amount of force that you can push that piston with.
I think you mentioned a really good thing in that conversation was about what you bring in your truck just to work on it. And I think you said just some basic tools you need. You had a vice grip, a screwdriver,
Yep.
maybe something to clean out that nozzle.
Yep. Yes. Some really thin, like a thin gauge wire,
Right.
and like a sewing needle. It has to be a really thin one because most of them actually don't fit through that hole.
Yeah.
But that could be a handy thing. I just have a little kit. So flathead screwdriver, pair of vice grips, little thin little needle, and with that you can do basically everything you need to do. And then of course the tray coater comes with a spare parts kit, but there are some things that don't come in the kit. Like I like to have an extra cylinder, for example, which doesn't come in the kit.
Do you have to take any precautions for cold weather?
Haven't had issues with cold weather.
Okay.
It seems to be about the same
Okay.
in terms of operations.
So on those parts, Ethan, so as you said, it comes with some parts, but you buy some spare ones so you have those in your truck
Yeah.
and can kind of work with that from there.
Yeah, so the parts kit it'll be all the rubber O-rings. It'll be an extra ball bearing and an extra spring. And I think we should duplicate all of these things because it could be 10 degrees out and you drop a ball bearing in the snow. That's like
That's
Yeah.
I knew you were
Yeah.
going there.
there's no way you're gonna find that thing
Or
again.
I could see myself like trying to pick up a spring and all of a sudden it goes boing.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. That's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so it's just good to have duplicates and just recognizing that a lot of the work we do is remote. If we can't fix anything on that paint gun that needs to be fixed, it's going to just kill our whole day.
Yeah.
So we gotta be prepared for even what happens if you have the part you need and you drop it in the snow.
Yeah. It seems like such a simple thing, but you've spent all the time to go out to a site to maybe, have everything you need to implement the timber sale, and then all of a sudden your paint gun goes down. And you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, that just threw a giant wrench in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other advice that I would give is that, we always try to do it. We want to get out there. We want to get out there marking timber and whatever. But I think that, if it's really not going, if the gun is really not shooting, what you should do is just take the whole thing apart, and it doesn't take that long. And you're gonna find it that way for sure, rather than you try one thing and you put it back together. You try
Mhm.
another thing and you put it back together. And what's going to ultimately be a better time savings for you is just to completely disassemble the gun. Again, it's going to take 15 minutes and to just, make sure everything's clean, everything's working how it's supposed to, and put it back together.
But Ethan, I guarantee someone's going to be in the future sitting on a tailgate going, "Thank you, Silvacast, and thank you, Ethan Tapper, because now my gun works."
And hopefully we could put links in the show notes to your video would be really nice. And then also maybe information too on links for people interested in your book. So
Yep.
That'd be great.
that's really great advice. So just really appreciate you getting up early out east here and coming on to talk about paint guns with us.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yep. Thanks, Ethan.
Thanks, Ethan.
John Freeman, welcome to Silvacast. For our listeners, tell us a little bit about maybe Panama Pump Company, you and where you guys are at.
Well, we originally started in Panama City, Florida in 1933, building a pump, a firefighting pump that went on the engine of a Jeep, put a little tank in the back, and the engine driven off the engine. And as it advanced, people, got to where they wanted to have air conditioning, and then they got a serpentine belt. So we moved out of the pump. We've actually changed our name to Panama Forestry Equipment.
Okay.
And basically we make tree marking guns, both stainless and mild. We make backfire torches, a flame gun we use for, burning brush and windrows and whatnot. That's about what we make. We're located in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, about 60 miles north of Gulfport, north of the Gulf Coast. So we influenced by the Gulf weather. We just dodged a hurricane.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seems like we've got one. Another one brewing down in the Caribbean. So we'll deal with it.
John, how big is your company? It's pretty small, right?
Pretty small company. We have 5 employees. We manage to sell pretty much worldwide. It's not a real big market, but we try to make sure that quality is the main issue here.
And you guys are famous in our world because the Panama paint gun, basically it's a lot different than some of the other guns that we have with they're basically working off of quartz. You guys are working off of pressure and larger volumes, and it seems like it's really popular with a lot of foresters.
We sell a lot of them. Like I say, it's a pressurized tree marking gun, so you don't have to keep pumping the trigger to make it work. They say that prevents carpal tunnel. We sell a lot of them. We're proud to sell them. We like to hear good reports.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to show my ignorance because we were having this conversation earlier about I've done a lot of small marking, so mainly using handhelds. I've used a Panama a couple of times, but as Brad said, we have foresters, especially on our larger properties, that really love them for those reasons you described, because they're marking all day, that sort of thing.
Well, normally they tell me they can put a gallon of paint in it, pump it up to about 100 pounds of pressure on the cylindrical tanks, air it up with the air tank or something. And then they can mark till dinner. And then they can go eat lunch or whatever they do, and then come back and mark in the afternoon. And they don't have to keep changing, adding paint or screwing on quart bottles or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, basically you get to talk to a lot of people using Panamas and you see these things. So for foresters, what are some of what you see as maybe the maintenance issues that we're dealing with, or what are we doing wrong when we're using our Panamas?
Well, this is a paint gun. And anytime you deal with paint, cleaning is essential.
Yeah.
We say that it doesn't hurt to leave paint in them overnight. But if you do, it's just like a spray can, turn the thing upside down, where the pickup tube is above the paint, pull the trigger and just blow all the paint out of the hose, the pickup tube, and the handpiece. Just blow the paint out of it. If you're gonna store it for the year or when you're through to the end of the season, it's best to take your thinners, mineral spirits, whatever thinners you use, just run it through the gun, clean out the gun real good, and put it up, dry it out, blow it out, pump it up with a little air, and just blow everything out of it, and it's good to go.
Okay, so that long-term storage, after you clean it out with the thinners, is just store it dry.
Right, correct.
After you blow it out. Okay.
But then it's not a problem if you're marking for the week, or you might take a day or two off. Just basically invert it. Just make sure that tube's not in the paint, basically.
Now, it doesn't hurt to leave the tube in the paint. You just want to turn the can upside down. It blows the air out of it, blows all the paint out of it.
Gotcha.
If I'm working with it, again, I'm going to show my ignorance a bit, John. If I'm working with it like any paint gun and I start to have a problem with maybe it's spraying inconsistently, is there something I should check first? Like, I'm out in the field, I'm working. Where should I start?
Normally, this is caused by something in the paint. A little piece of trash in the paint, a little piece of trash in the can. If you leave the can set up a good while and it gets to be a little fleck of paint in there, sometime it'll go to the handpiece. And the way the system works, the nozzle, every time you release the trigger, the plunger goes into the hole in the nozzle, so it's self-cleaning nozzle. So, you can work it a few times and maybe the plunger will eventually break it up. And if not, you just take the nozzle off, close the cutoff valve on the tank.
Okay.
Take the nozzle off the gun, off the handpiece, and just turn the valve on and blow just straight paint out of it. That'll normally clear it up. When you take the nozzle off, don't over tighten it. It's brass T and a steel nozzle. And if you tighten it too tight, it'll strip the brass. And it doesn't have to be much more than hand tight.
So is there any tools I should have along in the truck just to do some of this maintenance, or do I not need those?
Well, on the hand pump handle, there's a wrench built into it. And on the handpiece, bottom part of the handle, is another wrench. And that will fit, that'll take the hose off the gun, that'll take the hose off the tank, it'll remove the nozzle, it'll also remove the spring nut on the back of the can off the handpiece, and you can completely disassemble the handpiece with just those two wrenches. And they're built into it. I mean, they're machined into the aluminum.
Any issues with running with the pressure or anything when we get cold weather or for people up north?
I've had a few people ask me, they say, what do you do when it gets 30 below? I say, well, down south, we stay in the house. We don't need to paint. But I've talked to Nail Spot about paint freezing. They say that their paint won't freeze.
Okay.
They say if you use latex paints, which is a water-based paint, then it could freeze. And they recommend maybe putting a little antifreeze in it. I mean, that's Nail Spot, who doesn't make latex paint. That's just their suggestion. But,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not, like I say, we'd stay on the porch. I mean, in the house if it got that cold.
Yeah.
I don't think people down here can stay 20 or 30 below.
Yeah.
That's pretty cold for us too. So
Yeah.
especially putting a metal paint gun in your hand.
But some of them said, you know, they have to work in that condition.
Yeah. What you said, John, too, and I think we've heard this from others as well. A lot of these issues come down to the paint, the issues with the paint, and then that causes issues with the gun. I was just thinking about, do you have any tips as far as if you've got old paint, or you're just trying to, up here in the cold weather, we might maintain our paint inside the truck, keep it warm, that sort of thing, before we go out into the field.
You know, I'm not familiar that much with paint, but the way our guns are designed, there's no small opening in it other than the nozzle. And the plunger, every time you release the trigger, it cleans the hole in the nozzle. Some of the issues we have with the gun is, I guess, when people fill them up, they overflow them or spill the paint, and the paint will build up on the threads of the filler neck on the tank.
Mm.
And it continues to build up and build up. And then when you go to tighten the pump nut down on the filler neck, they claim it leaks there. So I say, well, do you clean the threads? Yes. But if you have to clean the threads all the way from the tank to the bottom of the threads, there's a section there that will build up, and it won't allow the pump nut to screw down all the way on the O-ring to seal the tank. Another thing we have is when people change the leather cup on the pump. When they put a new leather cup on it, the lips of the cup need to face down toward the inside of the pump barrel. There's a nut on there that's a castellated nut, a slotted nut. And when you put it on, it has to face the leather cup. It doesn't face outward, it faces inward. And what that does is when you pull the handle up to, charge the pump barrel, it allows the air to get around that leather cup. Some people tighten it too much. The leather cup needs to be able to just flop around on that stem. And the slots in that castellated or slotted nut needs to be cleaned. That's really the three big issues we have with it. People not keeping it clean where the pump nut screws down on the tank. And then when they put that leather cup on, they sometimes put it the wrong way, and they put that castellated or slotted nut on the wrong way, but it needs to face the leather cup and the brass washer that's under it. Those are really the three big issues that we see the most of.
Any issues with, you could basically pump it up, but you mentioned too, you can use a compression. If you're using compressed air, can you get it too high, or any problems with going in between those?
We make a cylindrical tree marker and we make an elliptical tree marker. Now, an elliptical tree marker won't hold as much pressure as a cylindrical, because the elliptical tank tends to try to get like a baseball. It tries to get round. So we limit the amount of pressure you can put on it. We don't have an air valve on that tank. We limit the amount of pressure that we put on, or the pressure you can put on the tank, by how far the leather cup goes down into the pump barrel. And we've got it where you can only put like 60 or 70 pounds on it. 120 pounds, a lot of air compressors are set for, 120, 130 pounds, which is fine with the cylindrical tanks. A lot of people will take a portable air tank with them, put 120, 130 pounds of pressure in the portable tank, and then they just pressurize their gun out of that tank.
Yep.
When you can put it in with compressed air as compared to pumping, that's always a better choice.
Right.
And, the hand pump is kind of when you have to use it.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people do this, but some people have tanks like scuba diving tanks or maybe bigger tanks. I've known people that use propane tanks, and they'll put a regulator on it and set the regulator at 100 pounds, and they don't have to worry about overpressurizing the tank. We test the tanks considerably higher than 100 pounds. If I was to say how much we test them to, somebody might want to try
it. Don't try this at home.
Oh, that's right.
Only the professionals.
And we test them with water. We hydro test them, and if something was to turn loose, then the pressure's instantly released. You can't compress water, so it's completely released. The pressure is as soon as the leak occurs. But we haven't had any failures.
John, I was going to say I've heard foresters rave about calling you guys just to get advice or questions if they had a problem with it. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of people who really love the customer service you guys provide too.
Well, my dad said to run a business the way you would like to be treated, the golden rule. And so far it's worked. So until something better comes along, we'll continue to use it.
Well, we really appreciate you talking to us today, John. And I know our foresters out in the field really appreciate your equipment and your customer service. So keep up the good work. We need that kind of resources out there to help us. So it's great.
Well, thank y'all. I appreciate y'all doing this.
Yep. Thanks, John.
And I hope your hurricane season goes okay for you. Well, we'll keep our cold up here and you can keep the hurricanes down there.
That's right.
How about that?
Yeah.
That'll work for us.
Looking for continuing education credits? Check out the Silvacast webpage for more information. And now, back to our show. So, Ryan Holm, welcome to Silvacast. For our listeners, can you tell us briefly a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So born and raised in the UP of Michigan, went to school to be a teacher and then taught for about 10 years. Left teaching to go into sales, and particularly coating sales. Been with Nelson Paint for about 5 years. One of my favorite parts of the job is working with our customers. Foresters and loggers are the best down to earth, hardworking people that I've ever worked with. So.
And you're located in the UP, right? So you're working with people, they're not in the distance, they're right with you there too.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the job is working in our Kingsford office. And in the afternoon, 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, when customers come in, right, and they need more paint halfway through a marketing job.
Yeah.
They look like a Smurf or covered in orange. And that's one of my favorite. That we always get a selfie together and stuff like that because it's it's fun.
And you're coming to us from the SAF National Convention right now.
Yes, that's why I'm having a good hair day. It's the high altitude, out in Colorado, the Rocky Mountain states. So,
well, I think we're probably both jealous because you're at the convention and we'd love to be there. But then, second, we're really grateful you take the time to sit down with us because you're at the convention, so you've got options. So it's good stuff.
It's funny that you bring that up, right? So, yesterday, walking around, I love talking to students and talking to just folks that are going to be new foresters in the nation, and it just introduced them to our paint and stuff. And it didn't matter if it was the University of, Michigan Tech University or University of Minnesota, right? And I told them I was going to be on Silvacast. Right away, they knew what I was talking about.
Wow.
They said they loved it. And I was taken back just a little bit because I know of it, right? And I've listened to it. But for them to know right away what it was, it's pretty cool. So you guys are doing a great job.
Wow.
I think those are the students whose professors make them listen to. But no, it's
yeah, we don't need to dig that deep because we just like the initial part of it. We don't need to dig for reasons.
It doesn't really matter how they listen.
That's right.
I don't care if they're forced.
A win is a win.
Yeah, that's
right.
Exactly right. So we're going to jump right into this, Ryan. You get to talk to, like you said, a lot of customers. who are using paint guns, paint, and just based on what you see walk in the shop, customers you talk to, what would you say are some of the biggest maintenance issues foresters have with their paint guns that they should be thinking about?
One of the biggest things with our paint guns is they're not pneumatic and they're not electronic. They're all mechanical parts moving interchangeably. It's very important that these guns are kept clean inside and out. And a lot of times customers will use mark trees one day and then wait 2 days and mark trees again. And sometimes the old paint gets clogged up in the gun and it might spray inconsistently, or it might just clog in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing, is every time you use our gun, you need to clean it at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is throw it on top of some mineral spirits or Nelson gun cleaner, and you spray it out until it sprays clear.
Would you recommend that they store that then in that thinner or paint cleaner, or should they take that out and keep it outside of that? How should they store that?
Very good. So great question. It should be stored inside that gun cleaner. The reason for this is there's leather cup leathers inside the cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
When those leather cups dry out, then the paint has a hard time sucking up and you won't get the spray and the velocity you need behind it. And that's how it's inconsistent when you spray. So always keep it in the gun cleaner. Or if you're using our new latex version of tree marking paint, you can put in antifreeze. It's fine too.
Okay.
So that's always like a big debate item for foresters in the field, because you get different opinions. So it's always good to kind of get it from the manufacturer about, should I keep it in the paint? Should I take it out, wrap it in a cloth? Should I keep it in the thinner? That sort of thing. It's been a long debate.
Yeah. And we see that. I talk to customers all the time and they swear by soaking it in motor oil, soak it in diesel. And that's not something we would recommend. We recommend to use mineral spirits or Nelson gun cleaner.
Yep.
I have a bunch of guns at home and I go out with customers all the time in the woods, and I want to know what they experience. And the best way to do it is to just grab one of our quart cans, fill it with mineral spirits, and at the end of a marking job, you put it in the mineral spirits and spray until it goes clear.
Yeah.
And then just let it be for that
Next time.
Yeah.
Would you do that on a daily basis? So say I'm going to be marking for a couple days. Would you put them in spirits at the end of each day, or is it at a certain point, like say there's a certain timeline when I'm not going to be marking for 3 days, a week, or 2 weeks, something like that?
I would do it every day.
Every day. Okay.
Yeah. And just let it sit there until the next time you need it.
Greg, this is explaining a lot of the problems I've had, because I've always just left it in paint.
And there's a lot to explain the problems that you have, Brad. So
Easy.
And even if, like, let's say you're done and marking for a month, put it in the mineral spirits. Otherwise, that dries out. You're going to have to, you can take them out, but you're just going to have to replace those cup leathers. Because it keeps on, you don't want those to shrink at all and crack.
Oh, okay.
And that's my issue, is I don't mark timber very often anymore. And so I go a long time between using the gun. And so it's just, I need a good way to store that and be able to take it out later and have it work. So if you do take it out, you take it out of the mineral spirits and put it on the shelf. It's fine, right? But the next time you go to use that gun, sometimes you have to open the valve at the very bottom, the little brass valve, and prime it with a little bit of mineral spirits when you put it back in. That will, so you don't have to pump for 2 minutes to get it going. If you throw a little bit of mineral spirits in the bottom, it will go faster and work easier. So Ryan, if I'm out and using my gun and it starts to maybe spray inconsistently or sputter a bit, is there something I should check first? Like, is there sort of start here and then work from there?
The very first thing you want to do is take the gun out of your paint, unscrew the valve on the bottom, the little brass valve that's in a cylinder. And what you'll see is usually there's twigs or dirt or debris in there, and that will screw that up. You have to be very careful because there's a little small bead
right
in the bottom, a little stainless steel ball. Do not let that come out of there, because then you're kind of up the creek,
dead in the water.
All right. Yes. But that's one of the things that we would look at first. We encourage our customers to do that. The other thing is the nozzle. Take the nozzle off. What I would recommend our customers do is keep a brush and keep like a pipe cleaner that you see in kindergarten, that your kids use in kindergarten, on those little pipe cleaners, and run through the top of your gun through that too. And then put the nozzle back.
Pipe cleaner's a great idea. Are there other things we should take out with us? So we're out for the day. We might want to take like some tools or extra parts or cleaning stuff like that along, just in case.
So yeah, pipe cleaner, a couple of them, a brush, like a little toothbrush, if there's something that gets caught. So what I would recommend is bring the toothbrush and the pipe cleaner, okay, and then an 11 by 22-inch nut driver, and then just have one. You can get them from us, or you can buy all the parts separate. But we have a complete cylinder package. It's the bottom part of the gun. And really, if you're going out, and you're walking a mile and a half back in the woods, we would just recommend you grab a complete cylinder package. It's the whole bottom part of the gun, and everything's together. And basically, all you have to do is, if something happens out there and you need to put the bottom cylinder package on, it's a lot easier to fix than to mess with individual parts when you're out in the field and there's pine needles and everything.
Yep.
And is that the size wrench I need to put that bottom package on? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that bottom cylinder package, right? There is like 13 different individual parts that are put in there, right? So it's a lot easier just to carry one little thing than to carry those 13 parts and have wrenches and stuff like that. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah.
The other thing I always like to throw in my vest, and I don't think it has anything to do with the paint gun, it has more me probably over tightening the gun on the court, is a vice grips, because I always get it always gets stuck on there, especially if maybe the can gets squished or dented and it's a little out of whack. It's nice to have that.
One of the tools that we would suggest too is like a 6-inch adjustable wrench and a 6-inch channel lock.
Ryan, you guys even have a tool, I think, that you guys sell yourself just for, because the other one too that you think about is everything can work in the gun, but you can't get the cap off the paint.
Yeah.
So you guys have a nice little thing you can slip in your vest for that too.
Yes. And they are called a cruiser wrench.
Yeah.
I almost forgot, but man, I'm so smart. It's coming to me now. So yeah, cruiser wrench. We have a ton of products, but yeah, no, a customer came to us about 4 years ago and said, I'm tired of bringing all these spare parts in the woods. You guys can just make it for us. So I want to say it's about $50, and you only need one to have. Just if you're going to walk that far out in the woods, it'd be nice, or in the field, it's nice to have everything you need.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things though is if sometimes the trigger locks up, or it you can't push anything through. It don't matter how much you pull on that trigger or push on that trigger, no paint's coming out. So you're probably going to break and do some damage to the gun or something with the trigger. So make sure, don't force it. Like I said, look at the bottom cylinder, the valve, make sure there's no debris in there. And then also the nozzle area.
Yeah, that's one feature I always appreciated too, is being able to switch the nozzle around, because sometimes that's just a clog up in the front too, and you can switch that around and it pops it out.
Yep. On every paint gun we sell, there's a little cleaner at the end that will cover. So you use that too to make sure that you're getting things, flip the little nozzle around, use that little stopper.
Yeah, it's got that wire on the end of the stopper that you can clean with. Yeah. I always appreciated just that simple engineering thing, because that seems, at least on my gun, that was always a common clog point.
Yeah.
And maybe that kind of leads into the next question too, Brad, is because I don't do a very good job of keeping my paint, I'm afraid. And so sometimes we hold on paint longer than we should, or it's just not stored well, and it gets kind of clunky or clumpy. Is there any way to revive that old paint, or is it pretty much get new paint?
Well, we would recommend storing it no longer than a year.
Yeah.
I know in the real world, right? You guys have budgets. Everybody has budgets to work with. And so you want to keep that paint because it wasn't cheap to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you really need to do is you need to shake it. Shake it, shake it, shake it. And I know it's going to be, if you want to use that older paint, what I would recommend is you dump those gallons into a 5-gallon pail. And then you buy yourself a squirrel mixer and you use remix it as good as you can, and then pour it back into your gallons or quarts.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would recommend. But I've used paint in the field, and I've seen customers use paint in the field that is 8 to 10 years old. So, you know,
I won't tell you how old some of the paint is that I've used, but you're exactly right. Like, you have budget to buy paint, and maybe at the end of the year you go, okay, I got some budget, I'm going to buy paint.
Yeah.
And that paint's got to last me a while.
Yep.
But it is definitely nicer using fresh paint. That's for sure.
Greg, isn't yours, you label your paint chunky and creamy, right? So you separate them that way?
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
So we pride ourselves on making the best darn paint in the world as far as tree marking paint, right? But any type of paint, from the second you stop mixing it and you put it in the can, it starts to separate. Just that's the fact of the matter. You can be the best paint company in the world, but it's gonna separate a little bit, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
So the biggest thing is mixing it.
You know, I'm curious. When I've used paint, I've always used like something like Super Spot. You know, you just have one, you use it, and you've got it in the back of the truck. It's always there for you. You have a couple different colors, you're good to go. But you guys, and I've always been curious about this, there are variations on that paint. So like the boundary paint and other things. And so I was curious, you know, if we're just using one, how big a mistake is that? Because like I've seen it, you know, in situations where we mark the boundary and then it doesn't keep up the way we thought it was going to, or vice versa. We do something and it's there a lot longer than we thought. So it always felt to me like I didn't quite get the big picture on the paint.
The more expensive the paint, the more solid content, the longer it's going to last in the woods usually. Customers always go to Super Spot normally, or Aero Spot, because they have relied on it and it's been true tested, and they can go back out in 4 years, or if a logger doesn't get in for 6, it's still going to be there. You know what I mean? They don't have to go back out and remark it.
No.
But the way things are these days, with budgets and price of solvents and price of products, it would be a very good idea to follow our recommendations in terms of, if you know that, like for instance, if you're marking timber that's going to be cut in 2 years, you should use our either latex paint or our Econo Spot. Latex paint, you're going to save $10 a gallon. Econo Spot, you're going to save about $4 a gallon. And we're very conservative on our estimates. We're going to tell you it's going to last 2 to 3 years. But the real answer is that's probably going to last 3 to 4, and maybe a little bit more. And that's the biggest thing. You know, we have customers all the time that order Super Spot, and we appreciate it. But if they want to save a little bit of money, you know that something's going to get cut in 2 years, and you should be using a different product, because you're buying a Cadillac to do a moped job, kind of.
Yeah. I just hadn't really thought about that kind of price point and what you actually needed for a time frame. So that's really good advice.
Yeah.
We started making latex paint for tree marking for the state of Maine probably about 20 years ago. And we only started selling it to the general public about 2 years ago. And it's some really good paint, either to mark boundaries or mark tree timber. And you're talking a $10 savings per gallon, you know? So, you know, that's a good chunk of money.
What's the longevity you expect on that latex paint usually?
Right about 3 years.
Okay.
Wow.
Now, in the state of Maine, so every batch of paint we make, right, we mark wood and we put it up on our roof. It has really bad weather on it, rain, snow. So it gives you a great testament of exactly what the environment's going to be like. It's bad environment. Snow hits it, everything. And some of that latex paint is very bright 6 and 7 years later.
Wow.
But our estimate though is 3 years, right? Because we can't tell you exactly how it's going to act when it's down in the heat of Alabama or Southeast United States or out in Oregon, so we give you a range.
Yeah. And it depends on a lot of the bark characteristics of the trees as well as that environment.
Yep.
You kind of start to learn those differences as a forester.
Yeah.
There's a difference between those species and cover types too on longevity.
Yeah. It's crazy though. One of the things I love about the National Convention, the S.5 or ACF, for the first time ever this year, I was asked by 3 different customers if we could make a paint that would disappear after 6 months to a year.
Oh, yeah.
That's normally not the case, but it must be a new need that's in the market.
I'm not sure what that need is, but
Yeah.
okay, that's interesting.
It's more for, I believe, urban forestry.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Right. Marking it. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Ryan, I was just curious. So no change in maintenance though. So mineral spirits, either whether it's latex or not.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You can use antifreeze if you're doing the latex.
Yep.
But we would just recommend using mineral spirits.
Yep. Any issues with the guns or the paint that we should be thinking about when it gets really cold?
Don't drop them.
Yeah.
Because anytime you drop and it's really cold, it's just not good for the gun, things like that. As long as it's mineral spirits, you're all set.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, keep it oiled. There are some, grease points when you take the gun out. There's some different spots that move back and forth. Just make sure things are clean. Yeah. The biggest thing too is if there's ever any issues, give us a call. We'll walk you through it. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of the field. We have 2 people that are dedicated for gun making and gun troubleshooting. Call us. It's free. We'll walk you through it.
Yeah.
And I know there's not the best service all the time, but even shoot me a text and we'll walk you through it that way if you're in the field.
Yeah.
We also do routine maintenance for your guns. So, if you don't want to clean your gun or, change the parts on your gun, just give us a call, ship it to us or drop it off, and we'll basically refurbish your gun, exchanging the parts we need to exchange for you. A lot of big companies out west and some in the Midwest too, at the end of their major tree marking season, we'll get 70 guns they'll send in, and we will change everything, clean everything, and it'll look like brand new guns when you get them back.
Wow.
You're going to be charged by the hour of what that, probably looking at a $30 to $40 charge in labor and then whatever the parts are. But normally it's not a ton of parts. It's just the normal parts that wear and tear. Don't be surprised. Like the biggest thing too is those leather cup leathers or those cup leathers, if you're not getting a good spray or you're having to work too hard with your hand to get some, the velocity out of the gun, sometimes it's the leather cups inside the cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
We better put that number on our favorites on our cell phones.
Yeah. Ours are going to be kind of the poster child for poor maintenance, I'm afraid, Ryan. It's like be a little embarrassed. But no, this has been great, Ryan, and very helpful to kind of talk through just some of these, what should be sort of standard operating procedures to keep your guns going and keep working. So I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, no problem. And like I said, we're here to help. We've been around since 1940. So we're all, even if you're in the field, just give us a call.
Great. Thanks, Ryan.
Sounds excellent.
Thank you.
Well, Brad, that was a really helpful episode. It just tells me that I think my paint gun's problem is me.
I was going to say, I feel bad now for what I've put my paint gun through in the past.
Mhm.
I mean, we'd name them. We'd be like, hey, that's my favorite. But then I didn't do half of the things right for maintenance, or I haven't done it, but I think I'm going to do a better job as we go forward.
Like they were saying, you need to make sure that it's taken out and cleaned out after each use or cleaned up in some way after each use. My main problem is I just end of the day, leave it on the can of paint, throw it in the vehicle, and then I forget about it.
Yeah, or just being careful with some of the paint too, because I know I've stirred up some paint and then you can actually see a chunk, and then halfway through the day I'm like, okay, that's on me because I knew it was there. I was just dodging bullets most of the day, and
Yeah.
all right, that's on me. So I think it's just paying attention to detail, like everything else. It's like if we can
Mhm.
do proper maintenance, kind of do it on a regular basis, and then kind of be good with the paint too that we're putting into it. Maybe not try to, if it's old, it's old. Let's maybe just think of some new stuff too.
Yeah. And we're going to have that contest of the person with the oldest can of paint wins.
Yeah, that would be cool. And we should send us a picture of the oldest can of paint you have, and we'll post it.
Don't send the actual can. We don't want it. We got our own.
That's right. That's right. We can do that.
Okay.
So, well, thanks everyone for listening to today's episode of Silvacast. If you have ideas for future episodes or a question for the Dropbox, please let us know. You can reach us at UW Stevens Point's Wisconsin Forestry Center by emailing wfc@uwsp.edu. Feel free to include a sound file of your question or a comment if you like. We learn best when we wrestle with questions, so keep them coming.
And take care, everyone. And as always, thanks to our team, Susan Barrett, our editor-in-chief, Joe Rogers, our IT master, theme music by Paul Frater, and of course, UW Stevens Point's Wisconsin Forestry Center.